Good morning, everybody. Okay, just trying to adjust this a little bit so that we can get a better view. And while I say hi to everybody, let's get this straightened out. There, I think that's gonna work. Okay. Trying to get a better view because this painting is so large. I've been finding it hard to get far enough away with the camera at the same time still so that you guys can hear me. I do have the microphone plugged in. Yeah, so hi Pam Oliver. Haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're keeping well. So I don't even know, it feels like day 463, but I think we're only on like day 9 of, I think day 9 or day 10 of live open studios. So, welcome everybody and thanks for watching, and thanks for watching even in the evenings and when you do have time to, hi Mel, I'm coming to your house after. Yeah, so everybody has all kinds of stuff to do these days, and I really thank everyone for taking the time, even later in the day, if you don't have time to follow along and do your own open studio, and you're not able to catch it live. Now, a lot of people have been finding my link over to, or over on my YouTube page, so that if you can't find it in the links on Facebook, it's always on YouTube later. And that's about it. So at risk of this sounding like a telethon, also I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to everyone who keeps supporting the print fundraiser for the Queensborough Carleton Hospital. We are, I think, just 28 prints short of the goal of giving the hospital $5,000 tomorrow morning. So thank you everybody. Woo, thanks Mel. Yeah, everybody, this has just been, it's been incredible having so much support, and they say thank you. And like I said, so that this doesn't sound like a telethon, I'll just get painting and we'll get talking. Now I don't see a lot of, hi Jules, I don't see a lot of my regulars who I know I'm gonna answer a lot of questions to. Hi Rhonda. So once they pop on the chat, I'll talk a little bit more about why I'm changing this painting so drastically. But just to give you, oh Lord, I feel I need to make myself some custom. Awesome. Okay, we'll talk because I actually have Doc Martens, although they're not called Doc Martens because Doc Marten didn't make them. They're called Martens, and they actually have a photograph printed on them of my, hi Maria, of my palette. And my palettes, as you can see, are always chunky and lumpy and full of texture. And so what I do is I photograph my palettes, and I take those high res images and I've been putting them on things like boots and shoes and stuff like that. It's so much fun. Anyway, we'll talk later. We'll send a link and see if we can't get something done together. Dulce says she has to buy glue, very little left. I think this is like, we're gonna have like a national glue shortage. I placed an order last night for white glue and wallpaper paste from Home Depot, and then my goal is to mix those together, so I have a big vat of glue. So a little tip for you there, Dulce, if you get the wallpaper paste, the pre-mixed, and add white glue to it, then you'll get something similar to like a Mod Podge, but it'll make a lot for your dollar. So they haven't told me that it's ready for pickup yet, but I'm getting desperate as well, so I hear you. Again, for those of you just popping on, just wanted to say thank you so much for supporting this fundraiser I've been doing. I'm only 28 prints, I believe, when I checked. Today I'm only 28 prints short of reaching my goal of being able to give the hospital $5,000. So, thank you everybody. It means so much. I couldn't help but organize this. when I heard about the crisis that the hospital is going through. And it goes much beyond what actually anyone would ever conceive to be like reality. Everything from, needing immediate supplies and masks and all that stuff, sure, and then opening up a temporary hospital in a school or a clinic in a school and all that. But here's the crazy thing. One of the things that they've had to do in the hospital is they've had to take all the frontline workers and put them in a hotel and so they've had to vacate the hotel because it's not safe for the hotel staff to be there. So they've put them, plus all high-risk patients, meaning elderly and people like that, from the hospital into the hotel that they've had to completely rent out, so kicking everybody else out in order to in order to keep them safe from bringing home any disease to their families at night. So the frontline workers just can't even go home even, right? So they have to go to a hotel and everything else. So these funds are being put in the hands of the women in philanthropy who are taking the money and giving it directly to the people who are going to be, hi Lindsay, directly going to be using that money for emergency use. So this is not going into general funds where we're paying salaries and admin and all that stuff. This is direct emergency funds. So for everyone who's contributed, thank you so much, and please share, because if you're in our city, you are affected, right? So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Anyway, off my soapbox, back onto the painting. So so a funny thing happens with me with paintings is that I take a photo, I go home, and then if the painting pops into my head, and sometimes they do, it's like the painting's talking to me, I'm like, oh, okay, so you want to talk about your future. So I pulled out the picture yesterday, and I went, it just seemed so evident to me yesterday when I looked at that photo that I have a structure problem. And for me, that is often something that when I'm in a class, sorry, I'll get back to you in a sec. When I'm in a class, I'm often looking at people's structures of their painting, and it usually doesn't take much to change it. Now, mind you, they're usually working smaller, so maybe this is why I missed this, is because I'm standing so far, like I'm here, I'm so close to it, but then when I actually looked at it in a photograph, I went, oh, I can tell you exactly what's wrong with that photo. So for me, what's happening is that this photo, I'm going to take these down so we can actually talk about it. This is predominant, right? So I tried to balance it out with color by adding some dark and some mid-tones up here. But I'll show you what's happened. I've created like a flag. I've got one big band horizontally. I've got a second band going horizontally. I've got a third band going horizontally. And at the top, I've got yet a fourth band going horizontally. So I actually, for me, the structure of these bands reminds me of like a layer cake or a flag, which is fine for cake and it's fine for flags, but as far as my art goes, not going to work. So I need to make some drastic changes to this. So I know Sophie is probably, who's not on the chat yet, but she's going to watch this later or pop in later, and she's going to see that I've painted this out, and she's going to say, what happened to your painting? So this is something that I will, honestly, I will tell you, you gotta be brave in your artwork. It doesn't matter what it is you're making. It doesn't matter what it is you are creating. You've gotta be brave, and sometimes that means a bit of collateral damage. So I believe every layer is contributing to the overall effect, but what I've got going here, these 4 bands, are just killing me. So I need to change this a little bit. And I don't really have a plan, but I just know I have to tone that down. So I'm going to pull out the painting from the other day. Make sure I don't hang myself on the microphone. All right, let's see if you can see that. Yeah, so that's the painting. That's the painting that I made the first... in the first few days that we were in this class together. And what I was showing you is that when I carved some lines, I ended up with a structure, right? And it wasn't just a circle in the middle. It's got this thing that supports it on the right-hand side, and then it's got this lower leg part on the lower left that comes out and supports it, plus a few little chunks here and there of color. And then the lines that carry you through are the branches. And overall, this painting really works for me because, hi Pooja, this painting really works for me because it's got a great structure, a great feel to it. Now, my natural tendency and ability is to work in square. And so it just seems to me that my brain can, and my subconscious knows how to go and delineate or divide up a square painting much better than it does know how to do a long rectangle. So, so taking that one down and looking this one, I have to change the structure of this if it's going to feel better to me, okay? So, so I'm just gonna go and start randomly, you know me, carving in my lines and see if I can't come up with a better structure for this painting. So the lines, as you know, are my roadmap. They're completely arbitrary, or are they? No, I have no idea. I'm not planning this, but I do know that if I can be as loose as possible with my lines, it's going to serve me much better. It's going to serve me much better in the end because I'll be able to follow some lines that otherwise, had I planned them, would just be way too contrived. Hi, Amanda. So, pardon the noise. How's everybody from Ottawa enjoying the snow today? That was a nice surprise, wasn't it? Yeah, Maria, I don't think I gave you enough sympathy the other day when I acknowledged your snowstorm, because that's what we woke up to today too. In fact, driving here was not exactly great. So, yeah, anyway. Okay, I've got some lines. I've got some white chalk paint. I am going to start painting this out just to a point where it feels better to me, because right now, like I said, it wasn't feeling so hot. Okay, let's get to it. The other thing I feel like doing, I feel like giving the moose some color. I don't know why, but we'll just see what happens. I'll get out some of the white chalk paint first and start painting out some of these lines and see what happens. But essentially I'm feeling like the there we go. Oh, feels better already and I haven't even done anything yet. Essentially the lines that will act as my roadmap may get painted over, but they're still going to give the painting some movement and direction. And then if I choose to follow a line later, or add some collage back in, or add some paint back in, I'll have a line, an outline that I'll be able to follow. I can't imagine how much better it feels to be getting rid of this band, or this banding situation that I had, which, like I said, in my mind looked altogether too much like a flag or a layer cake. And Dulce can relate. Hey Dulce, remember that time you painted that painting and it sold actually? Hey Jennifer. And it sold actually, but I do remember that everybody kept saying it looked like a cake. And I remember she was like, does it look like a cake? And I said, yeah, kinda. But the reality is, like, somebody bought it very enthusiastically. It wasn't even like it sat around for years and years and years waiting to be sold. That cake appealed to someone right away, whether it was a cake or not, and that certainly wasn't Dulce's intention, but that's what the overall effect was at the end of the day. And yeah, it sold well. Number 7, there you go. There's also something cathartic about giving up something that that just because you created it, it wasn't precious enough that it couldn't just be appreciated or recognized for the layer it is in the artwork. And I think there's, I'm going to say that again because I think there's something to be said in that statement, right? So I wasn't giving it up. I wasn't getting rid of the layer. I'm just appreciating it for where it's sitting in this tapestry, this layered painting. As you know, I like to paint with lots and lots of layers, and every layer is valuable. So just because yesterday I thought that maybe these layers were going to be more visible, as it turns out, they're not, but that's okay. Like, I don't feel at all that every layer will be visible, but every layer serves a purpose. Wow. Okay, that actually feels really profound. Every layer serves a purpose. And so whether that means that, you know, when I do a little scratching, a little piece of paper tears back and reveals, you know, this much on that painting, that might be one of the favorite little areas of this painting, or one of the things that anchors and shows the depth and shows the history and shows the antiquity. No, shows the history of the painting, because the painting has had many, many layers. So I'm actually feeling like this mousse might require a bit of whimsy. I don't know, like, it's not a great picture, I have to say. I took it, like I said, out of the sunroof of my truck, and so that moose was just walking by. So he's blurry, he's on the move, and he's just a baby, and it's not a great photograph. But to me, there was something about it that I thought, oh, I'm just going to try and print it and use it in a painting, because I think it speaks to me some reason. But I don't necessarily want the painting to be about the moose, if that makes any sense. I want the moose to be part of the painting, like part of my story that I'm telling in this painting, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the main character, if you know what I'm talking about. So sometimes the moral of the story isn't necessarily always told through, through the narrator, through the main character. It could just be through a philosophy or a principle or a feeling even, or how somebody makes someone feel. Speaking of great movies, I know everybody keeps asking. Hi, Karen. Everybody keeps asking what everyone's watching these days on Netflix or whatever. And if you haven't seen Peanut Butter Falcon, you should watch it. It is so good. So it's just a feel-good movie and makes you love people. And it's one of those heartwarming stories. So Peanut Butter Falcon, for anybody who's looking for something to watch tonight. Highly recommend. It was a great find the other day. And I always get people asking me if it's kid friendly. You know what, it's been so long since my kids were that age where I had to be concerned about that stuff, so I'm not 100% sure. But just check the ratings. Anytime I recommend something, that's the first question people always ask me. So I don't know what your tolerance level is for anything on. So as a parent, that's kind of your job. But I think it's pretty good overall. If you had maybe older kids that you weren't too concerned about people being real, because that's all it really is about. There, that feels so much better to me, and it's not. Like I said, it had nothing to do with what I had going in there, what the marks were I had in there. It had nothing to do with that. It was simply the fact that I had those 4 horizontal bands, and I knew that this painting had to change if it was going to feel comfortable to me. So now I'm going to put some collage and some paint back into it to make it feel more like a grounded painting. And I said earlier, I was thinking I might put some paint in the mousse, and I think that is going to be what's going to happen today. He just feels to me like he could handle a bit of whimsy. Now, I'm not one to love blue, but it's so funny, I tend to gravitate towards it all the time. And in the paintings that I just did for the charity, blue definitely outsells the red one, like 2 to 1. So I know a lot of you are with me on that when it comes to maybe not gravitating towards blue, or maybe not thinking that you choose blue, and then when it boils down to it, it actually is your preference. If Mel's still watching, I know she loves her blue. Okay, so these are chalk paints that I'm using. They are in squeeze bottles. I've been asked that before, only because I've transferred them in squeeze bottles to help preserve them. They dry up really quickly when they're in a can that has a paint lid on it. So I can show you one. This one here is a chalk paint, and it's in a can, and because it's so rusted and so thick, I actually can't even get the lid back on anymore. So for that reason, I protect and save my investment by transferring everything to squeeze bottles. When I first get it, it's a bit of a pain, but you know what? It actually really does work if you are investing in chalk paints of any kind, or clay-based paints. So let's get a little color on this mousse, shall we? So I'm going to keep up with the notion that he has fur. And so I'm going to use this almost like a paint by number, okay? So what that means is where I've got white, I'm going to make it my lightest color, and then where it goes darker into the black and the grays, I'm going to start to tone it down darker. So, and for anyone who knows anything about painting with acrylics, you have to paint your darker colors first and then start adding your highlights. It's really challenging to go the other way and paint too light first and then start adding your, to paint too dark first and then add your shadows. You really have to determine what it is you're doing. So in this case, because the body is black, I'm actually going to start with sort of like darker areas in this one and then come back in and add the light. So I don't know that it would be the same, only because I'm talking and teaching at the same time and painting. So I've lost a little train of thought. But there is no, in my opinion, there's no like rule of thumb, you have to do this one before this one. It's sort of dependent upon the actual image itself that you're working on. So oh, he's so cute. All right. So he's starting to take on a little tone. He's looking very, 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 what's a good word for this right now? A little out of place in context with everything, but you'll see. I'll show you how I'm going to pull all this together and tone it all together. And for anybody who has any questions for me, I'm always happy to entertain you with my answers, whether or not they are helpful or not, I don't know. But I'll give you my opinion, that's for sure. Okay. So these flowers I think are going to have to go. They're not, remember I said right at the beginning, so I think it was, I can't remember now exactly who was asking me, but somebody right at the beginning was asking me how I got the flowers there, and I was saying it was just part of the picture, and I wasn't sure if they were going to stay or go. I think they're going to be, if I work too hard to try to save them, it's going to be really difficult and challenging. So instead of working so hard to save these, I'm just going to let them disappear should they disappear. Again, contributing to the idea that everything is just a layer. Okay, so I got that blue going. Then I'm going to start to add a bit lighter blue to this. Now, I have very little patience as an artist, so what that means is if somebody were to say to me, you know, I don't have the skill to draw a moose like that or whatever, it's not that I'm particularly unskilled. I'm not going to lie and diminish what, you know, what I think I can do if I actually put my mind to it and my time to it. But I'm lazy in that I wouldn't take the time to repaint a moose completely properly or well or anything like that. So what I do is I use photographs, and then I really love the notion of using smoke and mirrors to make it look artistic and creative and spontaneous rather than perfect and well executed, right? So it doesn't interest me to make well executed paintings are like perfect. So a lot of times people say to me, oh, I can't draw. It doesn't matter if you can draw or not. Then if you can't draw, if that's your handicap, right, then you figure out a way to achieve what it is you want to achieve with the skill or the ability that you have, or the willingness to engage it. So myself, I know that I have enough skill probably to paint a well executed moose, but the reality is I know I don't have the patience for it. So that's why I'm just going to, there we go, apply the paint. Now I'm getting seriously lazy, but I have a few tricks up my sleeve. So one of the things, hi Marco, one of the things I'm going to do is come in with my baby wipe. And remember I was telling you, baby wipes are highly corrosive to a fresh paint surface, right? It just eats right through. And then water and baby wipes are deadly to a fresh painting. And so I'm actually using that to my advantage. Even though the paint is dry to the touch, I'm using my baby wipe to come back in and to blend and remove a lot of the paint. Now what that's actually doing, and I can show that later on in a close-up, but what it's actually doing is it's creating like a more fur-like brush stroke, but at the same time it's also allowing the photograph to come through. So I'm not having to recreate a lot of the highlights and the shadows, because the truth of the matter is the photograph has already done that for me, right? So it's like putting on makeup. We don't put on our makeup so heavy that we don't know what our face actually looks like at the end of the day. We put our makeup on to camouflage any imperfections and things like that, but we don't paint it all a different color so that it doesn't look like what's underneath. So that's why I'm doing it in such a fashion that it's super, super thin, to allow the actual photograph to come through and to do the highlighting and the shading for me. It's super dry in here because I have the heat on, so I'm just going to spray that with a bit of water. The water will just keep it a bit fresher, just so that it's a bit easier to remove subtly. He's looking so good in the blue, like it's actually making me more, I don't know, feel a bit more connected to this image, which, like I told you, it's not a great photo. It was taken out of the sunroof of the truck as we were driving by, and this guy was just walking on the side of the road, so it wasn't like he held still very long and posed for me or cooperated in any fashion. If anyone is ever under the understanding that large animals cooperate for photos, they don't. There we go. All right. So we're getting a bit more like a painting that I would like to continue to work with. So, so for now, I'm just going to let that dry. I think that's probably enough staining and removing right now. I'm just trying to get rid of any obvious brush strokes that look really bad. And you probably can't see it from far away, but I'm just going to fine tune just a wee bit. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to address that thing in the bottom because it's bugging me. So the flowers, yeah, no, actually let's try something else before I get rid of the flowers. So I had these two pieces of paper that fell out of a frame yesterday, and I thought, I wonder what they're there for, like they're spacers. But the interesting thing was that I really thought, I brought them over here to look because this little scrap of paper that I have left down here was this exact color. And then in here and in some areas, I still have some of this color showing, and there's little bits and pieces in the scratches of this very color. And it really made me think that, that I'm not done with this color, if that makes sense. I see a great line that I want to highlight, but I think I need a ruler. Believe it or not, even I use a ruler once in a while. I might use tape, but maybe for now I'm just going to freeform it. But there is a line that I want to highlight. There. So I know you guys can't see it, but it's there, and it just spoke to me. Okay, so it's whether it stays or it doesn't, it's very much doing its job of talking to me and telling me what to do next. I never have to wonder with my paintings, what do I do next? Because if I get quiet, I can actually just hear the next step or visualize what should happen next. Or I look down and there's a tool there that it's almost like it says, pick it up and just start using it. There, I don't know, that line, it's subtle, but it's working in this case. Alrighty then, so let's try and put that color that I was telling you about back into the painting. So I'm going to have to mix in an acrylic to get the actual color that I want to use, because the color in fine arts in acrylics is called bronze gold. And hi Terry, and it's a really difficult color to find because it's really not that appealing. Yet for some reason, I love how it works in contrast to anything black and white. So that, and there's a brown color that Golden makes called Van Dyke Brown. Both very hard to find. I find, see my pun there? I don't find, that's the problem. So they are very difficult to find, and so I when I get them in an acrylic, I'll convert them by adding some Liquitex clear gesso to it and some chalk paint, and hopefully I'll get a color similar enough that it makes this whole painting feel a bit more coordinated for me. All right, let's try it. That's all we have to do, right, is try. So I'm going to put an underlayer of this color, and maybe it won't work in such a huge capacity, but maybe it will. And the only way I'll know that is by trying. So any of you adept, we talked about this before, anybody adept at Photoshop and stuff like that, you don't need to go to the lengths that I go to try a color, especially on such a large surface. You can try doing markup on your phone, you can try in Photoshop, you can try using various apps. You can just change color and see how it looks mid-painting before actually committing to a color. But I'm trying to show you here like just raw process, right? Like this is how it works for me. I just get in there with a brush and I try something and see what comes of it. So I can see this being a good layer, but I don't see it being a top layer. I can already start to see that. So I'm going to continue with it because I can see that I need to put some more paint on top of it. And in some areas I might let it show through, so that's why I'm just going to do the whole, commit to doing the whole thing in this color, this background part, and then I'll do another layer, only over top of it, just because, like I said, I want some of it to show through, but I'm not convinced of where that might happen just yet. Oh, and for those of you who like drips, I feel some good drips coming on, so I'll dive into that in just a moment. So anyone following along, totally confused why I'm doing what I'm doing? Adding all these layers. I'm more than happy to share the madness with you. Oh, I didn't want to do that part, so I'll have to paint over that part. That part actually went beyond my line that I created, so I'm just going to go back in with my white and cover that up as soon as it dries a wee bit. Even I wasn't following my own guideline. So like I said, every layer serves a purpose to me, whether it turns out to be just a little bit of this shows through, or it warms up the underside. Something will happen that this bronze gold layer will be necessary to the overall intent. And Sophie, one of the viewers, has been, if some of you have been watching some of the pictures, she's been taking stills of some of the processes and put them all together for me and or for you guys to view, and it's quite shocking, really, the transformation, even when I saw it like that, even though I'm fully aware that that is how I paint. All right. Even more bronze yellow. Anyway, when she layered the paintings together, I have to tell you, it was a bit of a shock. And this one, because of its size, the transformation is going to be even more sort of shocking because it just requires more layers and more changes and bigger responses to bigger problems, right? So I wouldn't call them problems, but it's just back and forth. Like the image will have definitely taken on different incarnations, but that's really just because of the size of it. So at the beginning of this week, we were talking about upscaling the size of your artwork and different tips for doing so. And for me, one of the things that is always a handicap for me, and I wonder why I do it to myself every single time, well, not every time, but I do it to myself a lot, is I glue my image down first and then I work backwards. So for me, my best practice is to make a background and then apply the image, right? And so what I did in this case was I messed myself up because I was impatient and I glued the mousse in first to illustrate the point when you don't have an image that has full length. Like this guy had no legs, right? So that's why I dropped him to the bottom of this panel, and so I glued it in first to illustrate that point, but now it's actually somewhat crippling me a little bit because I've got this problem, if you will, with the balance. Much better. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but for those of you tuned in at the beginning, do you see the difference between the 3 or the 4 bands that I had previously created? They were fine, but they were really setting a tone for this painting. They were saying, look here, look here, look here, and look here, right? So the layer cake I had created was completely counter flow, if that makes any sense. And it's not that it was a bad painting, it's just that it didn't sit well with me when I looked at it on the phone. If one of you had painted it and you were my student and I looked at that painting, I would have said to you, how do you feel about these 4 obvious bands across the painting? And if you say that feels good to me, then rock on, you've nailed it, right? But in my case, what had happened was I just looked at the picture and I went, ooh, that actually doesn't really work for me. So I'm just seeing it's funny because when I look at it directly, I know it needs a lot of work. When I see it the way you guys see it, the feeling of this painting is just so much. This one, let's keep going in. I don't know what you mean, sorry. Am I supposed to be looking at a picture of this one? I keep going in. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So for me, this structure feels better, right? So this is a painting that I am more comfortable with. So it's not that the painting before had any problems. And that's what I'm always trying to tell my students. It's not what I want to see in your painting, it's what you want to see in your painting. So if you're looking at your painting and you're thinking, I don't know, this is just not working for me. The reason it's not working for you is because you're not creating it for you. You're creating it for someone else, right? Like we take in too much information and too much validation from other people because people are always sharing on social media and everything else. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? and then we talk to our family, we talk to our friends, and we talk to everybody, and they're like, wow, that's amazing. And so you hear that so many times because people are trying to encourage you, but they're not you, and they're not creating your art for you. And art is an expression of who you are, right? So if it's not feeling right, then basically you're speaking garbage. You're just not speaking your truth. So that's why when I looked at that picture, I'm like, it's a great painting, but it's not my painting. It just felt like maybe, I don't know, I was just trying to balance and to structure and to this and to that and to respond to. But when I stood back and looked at it, I went, yeah, it's nice, but it's not me. So I have to keep working with what I'm developing here so that this feels good to me, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that this has to actually be my voice for, if that makes sense. My painting is speaking for me. So if my painting is speaking words that aren't mine, then the inauthentic artist in me is coming out. And those are the paintings generally that I look back and I go, yeah, it's fine. And then it's great. They may sell, they may whatever, but they don't feel like I've gotten my point across authentically. So again, let me get down off my soapbox here so I can continue to paint, because I tend to get on these little tangents about being authentic in your work. But I believe that it's practice and listening and being honestly critical with yourself when you're looking at that painting and saying, is this what I want to say? And if the answer is yes, it doesn't matter if it's beautiful or not or whatever, you may have to make some adjustments. And one of the things that I often struggle with, yes, I struggle in my art a lot, but one of the things I struggle with is a lot of times my paintings look maybe too grungy, too dirty, too destroyed, like it was a painted and then it was left out for 3 winters. You know, like my paintings just look like they may be falling apart, and that's just because of all my scratching and my layers and everything else. But for me, it actually feels really good. I really like that. So I've been told many times by mostly by gallery owners, you know, you should completely tone this part down, or maybe do less of that, or is this part meant to be, or whatever. You know, if they see something crackling and the paint looks like it's falling off, and they're like, could you fix that? And I'm like, no, that's the way it's supposed to be. And they're like, but it might fall off. And I'm like, then let it fall off. So thank you, Pam. They seem like wise words. They sound like babble in my head, but it was serving me twofold. One was to help you all own your own artwork, because I really believe it doesn't matter if you're writing or if you're painting or if you're drawing or if you're baking or what the heck you're doing, whatever it is, as long as it's authentically you, then rock on, because that's all you need to do. Just going to check the time. 10 minutes. How does this keep happening? It feels to me like I'm never getting enough time to paint, because this is such a huge painting. And I'm just afraid that if I continue on after you guys, after we're done, that I'm going to completely lose you in terms of having done too much, too fast, made too many drastic changes. So I am going to stop today against my better wishes, because this is actually starting to feel more like me. Like this painting is starting to feel better. This painting is really starting to feel like something that I would create and I would be happy with. And when someone would say to me, you know, what does this painting mean? I would be able to very authentically and proudly answer that question. Instead, when I don't know how to answer a question, is generally because I've allowed myself to get into that place where my art becomes less and less authentic, and it's more because it's visually pleasing. Okay, so let me try and put that in context. So if I paint I work for a publishing company, so I'll tell you about that. I work for 2 publishing companies. One of them is always into development. So they'll say to me, oh, elk or not elk. They'll say to me, I don't know, cotton is really popular. Could you paint some cotton? Well, if I just go and print a pretty picture of cotton that most people, like 80% of the population, would be happy to hang in their bathroom, then I've created a product, and that's wonderful because product really pays the bills sometimes, and that's one of my jobs, right? So if they want cotton, they'll get cotton. But if they said, you know what, go crazy, paint cotton the way you see cotton. Well, I don't know what my version of cotton might be, but again, it might look like it was, you know, dragged through the mud a few times and left out in the elements to decay before it actually looked authentically like real cotton. So it has nothing to do with whether or not I'm adept at painting cotton. What it speaks to is what the purpose of that painting was for in the first place. So I always want you to evaluate that within your own work, why it is you're making, or why it is, oh, here's valuable words for you, Pam. Why it is we are outputting what it is we are outputting. So I fully believe in trying to express myself when I'm doing my art as authentically as possible. So my output is my truth. So in anything we do, you have to always question why it is you're doing what it is you're doing. And if the answer is I am making a product for whatever, for a show, for a fundraiser, hey, there's a good one. This fundraiser piece that I did, I had to be a bit more commercial in that at the same time being more me, because I knew that my grunge appeal stuff might not appeal to lots of people. So my goal was to raise money for the hospital, and so I thought I have to tailor this product to be, you know, it's authentically me. However, what I am saying in that painting is something very different than I do when I just go into my art, right? So there. So and you know what? And I love the pieces that I did for the hospital. I actually love them. Like, I think they're really pretty. I think they speak well to a time. Oh, let me show you something authentic and kind of magical that happened. So I'm going to put down this for a second because I'll be right back. Stay tuned. This is very exciting. All right, so I'm going to take down the moose for a minute because it'll be too visually competitive, I believe. Whoops, my apron just fell off. I'm a mess. All right, got the microphone back on. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to put up these 2 paintings. So these are the originals that I did. You can see that in there. I'll put the other one up. These are the originals that I did for the fundraiser. And I'll adjust the camera so that we can see both. There we go. Wrong way. Okay. Okay, so these are the 2 that I did for the fundraiser. And this one is square, this one is not. And so I actually had the photographer crop this one so that it felt better. But the craziest thing happened was that I created them very, I don't know, like I didn't really concern myself about what colors to choose and all that. This one ended up being called the red one, and this one ended up being called the blue one. And when I put them into the Shopify site, I had to name them separately so that people knew which one they were doing. But initially, I had thought that they would be more complementary to each other, that they would be called Hope for Today, Hope for Tomorrow. And then when I separated them, I thought, I have to assign a name to one versus the other. So initially, I just labeled the blue one as Hope for Today, and then the red one as Hope for Tomorrow. And then I thought about it, and I thought, well, we're kind of in an emergency situation right now. It's a little dire right now. Things aren't good. And so I thought maybe it's a bit more like red alert, right? So I thought, okay, so maybe that's Hope for Today. So I called this one Hope for Today, the red one, and I went, okay, that's fine. And then I called the blue one Hope for Tomorrow. And then I sent them to the photographer, and they were transported vertically. And when he sent me the digital files, he had done all the photography and everything else. I didn't have the heart to tell him that this one had a bit of a drip on the left side. And one person, and when I saw it, I went, oh no, like that wasn't supposed to be there. That actually happened just because the painting was still kind of molten, right? It had some oil in it and it dripped down. So this drip wasn't intentional. And yet when it was called Hope for Today, everyone's been telling me that these hearts, with the way the movement goes and everything, they represent the earth. So I hadn't intended that, but I find it really interesting that that's what a lot of people have been saying. And then way back, the first painting that I did, that I told my viewers, was that I said, I think this round part represents the earth. And then all these drips were going through it, and one of the viewers said, oh, the earth is crying. It's sad right now. And when I looked at this and I saw that there was a tear coming off of Hope for Today, and it actually just stopped me dead in my tracks. I thought, wow, that is like, that's beyond me having had a hand in anything, right? So anyway, so I get choked up when I think about it, because like it just happened, and it was really incredibly beautiful when I realized that the Hope for Today had a tear, and then the Hope for Tomorrow is more bright and clear and open. So thank you all for tuning in today, and keep those questions coming and stuff. I check comments over the course of the day and tonight and everything else. It's the last day for the fundraiser, so I'm a little bit busy, but I will answer your questions, and I love the fact that you guys keep watching and keep engaging in finding time to be creative every day, because I really believe that for us creatives, this is really, really, really important that we discipline ourselves to take the time to do so. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Maria. And I'll see you all back here tomorrow, and I promise not to touch the moose, although I'm really tempted, but I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.